Hello and welcome to Stories That Shape Us, the series where we step behind the professional profile and into the personal journey. We'll be exploring moments, mindsets and milestones that shape the people driving service transformation across industries. My name's Steph and I will be your host in guiding today's conversation with Barry Corless. Barry is a director consulting expert at CGI. And a huge focus of Barry's role is supporting clients and colleagues in navigating the challenges and opportunities with SIAM and IT service management. Barry is a connector of people, ideas and best practice to deliver real value together. Barry tells me he's much closer to the end of his career than the beginning, and I believe with that comes a powerful perspective on what truly matters. And in the true spirit of continual improvement, Barry has agreed to share his story with us today. So Barry's lessons learned, knowledge and words of wisdom will hopefully prevent us from learning the hard way. So Barry, welcome.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. And we're going to start right back at the beginning. So I want to know, not necessarily about baby Barry Corless, but what drew Barry into the industry? Where did we begin?
Well, Steph, I got into IT absolutely and totally by accident. I'm not the only person that's probably ever said that. I got there by accident. Yeah. I wanted to be a weatherman. I'd kind of done a little bit at university. I dropped out of university and effectively just doing bits and pieces of jobs. And then I saw a job as an assistant scientific officer with the Met Office in Bracknell. And I thought, wow, I want to be a weatherman. I'd always been interested in the weather, done it at O level and so on and so forth, meteorology. And I thought, great, this is it. This is the career. And I got the job with the Met Office starting in Bracknell. And the first thing they said to me was, listen, Barry, you've really got the wrong A levels to be a meteorologist. You've got the chemistry, but you needed the maths and physics, and you've got geography and biology. So you've got two choices. You can go to Reading and do a HNC in computer studies, and we'll promote you in 12 months. Or you can go to Farnborough for 3 years and do applied physics. So that was it. That was the weatherman kind of put to one side, although still mad fascinated by the weather and so on and so forth. But I ended up in the programming techniques team and working with a number of real experts. Got to learn a bit about programming in Fortran, working with a supercomputer. And actually, it really was a brilliant grounding in IT because the Met Office, give them their due, trained you to death. Yeah. So
Wow.
from an IT perspective, it was a really, really, really good start. And I just got into it like that.
I love that. That was fascinating. I didn't actually know that about you, so this is news to me as well. And so then from there, how did you guide your journey continue? Like, did you just then pursue IT and follow that path?
Yeah. I got a kick from solving problems. I think everybody in IT is kind of like that. And again, I won't be the first person that said that they really, really enjoy solving problems. And I spent a couple of years with the Met Office, and I was working down in the south of England. As you can tell, this is not a sort of an estuary or a sort of West London accent. I was pining for the north, came back to the north of England to work for the Co-op in Manchester. You cannot get more north of England working for Co-op in Manchester. I defected from Fortran as a programming language to COBOL, and I also got defected from IBM as my mainframe to ICL, and I got this kick for solving problems. And the one that really, really, I think started me in a career, and in some ways, all the way back then, moved me towards SIAM, was I got a programming role in Co-op on the NIPS system, non-impact printing system, NIPS. And it was to write an interface for the specialist printers that the Co-op had bought back at that time before EPOS. or as EPOS was just starting to be rolled out in the early to mid 90s, they used to print reams and reams and reams and reams of store documentation. And as you can imagine, you needed some pretty heavyweight printers to do that. And they bought printers from Canada that used, they were non-impact printers, and they used to do 85 sheets a minute double-sided. So they were really state of the art at the time. And this program that I wrote was kind of the interface between the programmers producing all the documentation for stock and order books and shelf edge labels and all sorts of things, and these printers. And so I became the expert in it, and I was knitting together sort of 3 suppliers, internal teams, and so on. So I could argue in some ways I was doing SIAM before my time, back in the mid 90s, and making sure that these could work together. I got a real kick from that problem solving, and basically, just kind of carried on from there. I was working in a base, what was called the base support team, which was effectively looking after the mainframe. So you were problem solving in lots of different areas all the time. So it was kind of long answer, but that's where it came from.
No, I'm here for the long answers. And I think another common theme of doing SIAM before you even realized it, or before it was maybe even a thing for a lot of people. But another thing that you talk about is obviously connecting people and ideas and best practice and stuff, which I'm sure formed a lot of that role as well. But is there anyone from the early days that perhaps guided you or connected you to any of these things, and perhaps still have a relation with now?
Well, there were actually 2 or 3 people in the early days. There were when I was at the co-op, there were the 2 Marks. The team manager, Mark Arthur, and my manager who led the base support team was Mark Wademan. They were unique in that both of them used Mark as their name, but had other first names. That's kind of irrelevant, because one was J. Mark Arthur, the other was C. Mark Wademan, so they didn't use their first, I won't mention their first names, even though I know what they called that. They were both, they both helped me in very different ways. Mark Arthur had a traditional IT degree background, and so he was very, very strong in that. Mark Wademan's background was as a trained geologist at degree level, so he got into IT by accident as well. So those 2, and I probably got to give a mention to a guy when I moved out. I know one of the things you're going to ask me about, are there any sort of stories or moments that help define you, define your purpose and your values? And that was my move into training and consultancy. Got to the end of the 90s, and we were, Y2K and all that was coming up. And I just sort of fancied a move. I'd been working in IT for about 13 years at that time, with the Met Office and the co-op, and being outsourced to Atos. And I thought, it's time for a move. And somebody had said to me, do you fancy training? And I thought, well, I don't know. It depends. Well, there's an organization, SysOp, who are looking for somebody who can train ICL mainframe, but they want to cross-train them into training ITIL as well. Now, I knew about ITIL because we've been doing it for 3 or 4 years at the co-op by that time anyway. So I was aware of it. I was using it, and so on and so forth. And that move, and the people who the sort of 2 mentors at the time in the co-op, Steve Mann and Warren Dakin, they were brilliant. And Stuart, mentioned to Stuart Saul as well, who owned SysOp. That opened up a world of variety and a real thirst for combining the best of tech, ICL mainframe at that time, and the best of ITSM best practices. So that's what really got me to thinking about, well, hang on, I can use different blocks here to make solutions for organizations that are actually going to work. So Mark and Mark from the co-op, and Steve, Warren, and Stuart from SysOp for certain.
Nice. So where does this take us up to then in your career? So obviously we've kind of come out of that early stages and a little bit more into latter stages now. And yeah, I guess just kind of digging into that then, how do we build on that and key moments that then evolved from there?
Yeah, I think the real key moments, there was with SysOp, I was there for around, I'm weird. I either stay with an organization a long time or I'm with them for about 5 minutes.
You know
And
what you like, Barry.
well, there we go, and I was, I'd been at SysOp about 5 years and looked for a change. I had a very, very short spell with Parity, as was as a trainer. They drove me into the ground. But then I got an opportunity to go and work for an organisation called Remark, who were later 5 years down the line taken over by QA. And there I became their very first service management lecturer consultant and the idea was to build up a practice for service management. And when I was there, I started building some really, really great service management people came along. There was two guys, Dan Gear and Matt Davenport, who were doing the selling of service management. And I was slowly but surely building a team of lecturer consultants, one of whom was a certain Claire Hicks, who became Claire Agata in later life when she married, who we all might know as the Queen of Siam now. So, I always like to embarrass Claire by telling the story of actually giving her the job. I'd met Claire at an ITSM conference, and she was looking for a job, and I was over I think in Belfast, doing some work over there. And I said, right, we'll do an interview on the phone. And the 30 minutes on the phone was good enough for me. I didn't have to meet her in person. I just offered her the job there and then. And, the rest, shall we say, is history. So, I feel that tiny, tiny bit of responsibility there for what Claire has become. And we've stayed good friends all the way through, right the way from back then. So, yeah,
Yeah,
cool.
I love that, and I love how it all comes back together. Like seeing and speaking to people in the community, there's a lot of people who know each other and have known each other for a very long time. But then there's like, hey, I didn't even know of this person, and they've also been in the industry for a long time. So it sounds like there's lots of little circles that kind of all have come together as one big one, which I really
Yeah,
like.
it's the smallest big industry or the biggest small industry you can think of. I don't know which way around that should be, but yeah, it's true. You do run into a lot of people who know a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think kind of coming into that then the industry and how it's perhaps evolved, like we've talked about the people coming back together, but what else have you seen through the timeline that we've talked about so far? How has it evolved and maybe what stayed the same or what's changed your approach in how you lead and work?
Yeah, it's interesting, really. I think if I take them separately, IT service management, there's a guy called Rob England, a native of New Zealand, and Rob, uh, back in the sort of early 2000s, was the self-styled ITIL skeptic who used to talk about Castle ITIL. And when ITIL was pretty much, from a service management perspective, the only game in town. And he used to criticize, often tongue in cheek, I think, its aloofness. And from that point, sort of in the early 2000s, the walls of Castle Ital haven't quite come tumbling down completely. But I think as other approaches have come to the fore, things like lean and DevOps, and agile and so on and so forth, then things have started to change. Some of the basics are still the same. It's still a good idea to test a change before you put it live. IT Service Management 101. Priority is based on, what the business needs. But it's led me personally, I think, to be more willing to embrace all alternate approaches I've always been keen to see how DevOps and Lean and Safe and other stuff worked with ITIL. And I've been lucky enough to get involved in assignments over the years where not because I got involved, not because I was necessarily the guru in a particular area or some sort of deity, but because I had this infectious enthusiasm for making some of these things work together. So, I can remember one gig I did over in Prague in December. Prague is a brilliant place to visit in December. With Christmas markets and so on, bit of snow around Christmas. Anyway, not doing a travelogue for Prague, but there it was about agile, Scrum, and service transition meeting of minds. I also had a good one over in Scandinavia with a financial institution over there where it was ITIL and Safe, and there was a German guy in charge of the operations, the IT, and he said to me, he said, Barry, I have operations on one side who love ITIL. I have developers on other sides who love Safe. They are fighting religious wars with each other. Help me. So, getting those to work together and finding ways of those working together was absolutely brilliant. And, I've always kind of enjoyed that. So
I'm sorry,
I was going to say, that's the kind of ITSM has really been about, it developing with us. SIAM in some ways is actually a little bit easier because it's moved to mainstream. I was there when, God love him, Kevin Holland was doing his niche presentations at ITSMF about SIAM, and everybody was thinking, okay, Kev, what you're on about here? And the work that's gone on there, that Claire and Dave have done with scopism is absolutely nothing short. Is nothing short of astonishing. And, SIAM's moving to the mainstream, and the realization now that it can drive real value in organizations is really the thing that's changed considerably. And I think the way that SIAM has been managed as a best practice, without having to be too nice to Claire and so on, but as a community, Steph, so you've been responsible for bringing 5,000 people into this community now. The way that it's been managed as a community has been a massive positive in the way that SIAM's moved forward. So, yeah, changes. If you talk about SIAM, probably the first word you think about is collaboration. And that's something that's driven through both SIAM and ITSM, that the more we've collaborated, the better we've got.
Yeah, I like how you position that. And I think something that you said at the start of that was the willingness to embrace these other methodologies, framework, practices, whatever that may be, and kind of bringing people together to understand that a bit more and the benefits that come from that. And I guess just one thing for those listening is, how do you encourage people to embrace that more? Because obviously we see new people coming into the community who have maybe, they haven't used SIAM or they don't really know much about it, but they want to learn more. Have you got any advice for those people?
Two things I'd probably say. One is using the right language, and making it accessible, making SIAM accessible. We don't need to sort of delve down into jargon straight away. But I've very often thought that the people who introduce you to a new concept, be it SIAM, be it IT service management, be it flower arranging, be it car mechanics, whatever it happens to be, if that person has got passion for it, it sells. There's an old saying, isn't there, that passion sells. And I think that I've said for many, many years that, ITIL Foundation can either be, could either be the death, SIAM Foundation equally, could either be the death knell for SIAM or service management, or it can be the thing that really takes you off. And the person stood at the front, the enthusiasm that they deliver for it really, really does get people up and running. So, my advice would be to go and see somebody and talk to people who are advocates, but realists as well.
Mm. And I think that's what I love. And I'm not even biased because I see it from the members that we have and the people who reach out to. But the champions that we have within the community is you guys are the passion behind it. You are people who are realists and you've understand, lived and breathed what we're doing. And to have that for people to reach out to is really useful and valuable for the community. But, I've seen you guys at conferences and that's not just in the community, that's in person. And the people that you interact with buy into you as people because you are that kind of that passion behind it. So yeah, I love that. Before we move on to then, sorry, were you going to say something?
No. I was going to say
didn't-
if SIAM was a used car, anyway.
You guys selling it. Well, I'd buy it. But no, I guess kind of before we come into more current work then, is there anything that from the past or leading up to where you're at now, where you've experienced real personal growth or moments of resilience? Because I'm sure we all have to go through that at one point or another, or any unexpected pivots for you?
I think the unexpected one was around about 2005. ITIL version 3 was in the offing, and version 2 was still there. And APMG at the time had taken over from BCS and X in the running of all the ITIL exams. And I tried to become an examiner with ITIL back in the BCS days, but to be honest, I probably wasn't experienced enough at that time when I applied and I had the interview. And David Wheeldon, God love him, who was the chief examiner at the time, said to me, he said, "Barry, you've got everything you need. You just need a bit more experience." And I kind of, took that and I thought, well, okay, maybe in the future. And then all of a sudden, gets a phone call out of the blue. "Hello, Barry." "Hello. My name's Richard Faro. I'm CEO of APMG. You know who they are, don't you?" "Oh, yeah, of course." And he said, "I've been passed your name." He said, "How do you fancy becoming an examiner for ITIL?" I said, "Yeah, okay." He said, "Well, what we want is we're looking at ITIL 2. It's going to run down over the next 2 or 3 years, and we want somebody, to be its dignitas, to give it for ITIL 2 and get involved in 3 as well." But we got Sharon Taylor as the chief architect and lead examiner for that. So how do you fancy being an ITIL 2 examiner? I said, "Oh, thanks very much, Richard. What's involved?" He said, "Actually, I've got one more question. How do you fancy leading the group?"
Wow.
So from nothing to chief examiner from ITIL 2 in one 25-minute phone call. And I said, "Course, Richard." And the brilliant thing was I got together a sort of group of examiners, Trish Lewin, Rose McGurney as was, and probably the two that were the real difference were the two Ronnies of ITIL, I used to call them, although as one were on and one Dave. Unfortunately, both have passed on. Ron Beals and Dave Jones from Pink, and they went everywhere as a team. And I got those two as examiners and a really, really strong team. And that was the unexpected one that lifted me up into a different league, because I got very, very involved then in, where ITIL was going from an education viewpoint, and where service management was going from an education viewpoint, sort of being on the global, being on the global team there that were directing it. Because as version 2 examiner, you had a sort of seat at the table, so to speak. So that was probably the unexpected one, and much love to two, and may they both rest in peace, Ron Beals and Dave Jones, the two Ronnies of ITIL.
No, I think that's really, yeah, I didn't know that either. Obviously, I'm full of knowledge journey here. But is there anything then that you would advise to people who maybe face themselves in similar situations in the future?
I'm not sure, to be honest, it was something I always felt I could be an examiner. I got the opportunity, and you never know unless you actually have a go at it. And with four people, Ron, Dave, Trish, and Rosemary, who had been examiners already, then they were all very, very supportive of what I was trying to do. So if you've got the right people around you, whatever, just go for it. Yeah, but you've got to have the right people around you. I can imagine one or two examiners I know, it might have been a little trickier,
Yeah.
but they were brilliant.
Oh no, it's good advice. And I would ask another question, but I don't know if there's an answer possible to it. But how do you know who the right people are? If you're new, I mean, we're probably going to come to this towards the end, but
I guess instinct, isn't it? You
yeah,
know whether somebody quite quickly, whether somebody's a good or a bad,
yeah, true.
so to speak. And I think from that to that extent, trust your gut and your gut feeling, how people come across. Whether people are natural in the way that they come across. You can tell somebody who's acting
Yeah.
very, very quickly because the guard drops and so on. And so the other thing is go out and get drunk with them as well, because you see, but maybe not advocating that for everybody.
Is it in Finland that they go in the saunas? They all go out, like that's part of their socializing and networking. I don't know if you've done much work in Finland as well. I feel like I've heard
Actually,
this.
but believe it or not, it's the one part of that part of the world that I've not been to. I've been to Sweden, I've been to Norway, I've been to Denmark, but I've never been to Finland. So I've no first-hand advice for you there, Steph.
Oh, I'm sure maybe it was Steve Morgan or someone who was telling me about the saunas. I mean, I've been and I loved it. But anyway, we digress. So coming to the world of work now for Barry, then what's driving you today?
Variation. The role I've got at CGI really does afford me the variation. And I've learned over the years that I'm at my best when I've got a number of things on go at once. I mean, just kind of thinking at the moment, I'm working on a SIAM transformation with colleagues from CGI Netherlands on a retail organization based out there. I'm working with one of our clients from health research on a learning management strategy. I'm also doing some short sort of IT service management learning videos for a big government project. And that's alongside the Astrid work that I'm doing for Scopism, the SIAM professional update, and putting together with the wonderful Siobhan Hobbs, an ITSMF workshop day on SIAM, So I've got all of these things going at once, but it keeps me fresh. If I get, there are 2 hours doing that, right? I'll go and do something else now. And for me, some people like to go deep and stay in their lane. I'm one for lane changing and jumping between projects, always using the indicator and rear view mirror, of course. But I'm one for jumping between lanes, and because I know that some of the ideas can spark solutions in another area. So it keeps me energized, keeps me curious. I've got to remind myself every so often to pause and focus at times, and that's why one of my hobbies is bird watching. In fact, here we go. Regrets, I've had a few. Is the t-shirt today, and that gives me the opportunity to go out and stand in moorland and with a pair of binoculars and a telescope, and just stand around for 3 or 4 hours on your own, or you can go and get involved in a bird hide. It doesn't make any difference, but that allows me to sort of unwind and to focus. But I found that this idea of being sort of jumping from project to project keeps me adaptable, keeps me creative, and helps me to find connections between things.
I love that. And I feel like I have so many questions, but because I also really enjoy variation, I think that's a big part that feeds into my job, but this isn't my story today. But so what advice would you give somebody maybe then who has that and maybe has conflicting priorities? And, these are things that maybe we get asked in interviews of how do you manage that? How do you prioritize? And Have you got any words of wisdom or advice to possibly pass on to somebody who doesn't know how to do that at the minute and take advantage of that?
Yeah, it's interesting that I would. What can you really affect is a question that I continually ask. If I can't affect something, don't worry about it. Yeah, if there's
Mhm.
no, I mean, there are so many things going on in the world at the moment that that I can't affect, so I don't spend time stressing on them. And it's the same in your personal life. It's the same in your work life. So my advice would be to concentrate on the things that you can affect, and to concentrate on the things that you enjoy as well. And in some ways, subconsciously, I probably did that many, many years ago. So 1982, when I was choosing my A levels, everybody was saying to me, oh, well, maths, physics, and chemistry is the best combination. If you want to go here, you want to do this, you want to do that. And I said, to be honest, I just want to do the three that I enjoy the most: chemistry, biology, and geography. It was a weird combination to do at A level, and I was probably the only person that was doing that three at my school as a combination. But, here I am now, and I don't regret that choice back then. So, concentrate on stuff that you enjoy doing, and really make sure that you concentrate your time as well on things that you can affect, rather than stress and take time on things that you've no chance of affecting.
Yeah, and I think you just struck kind of a chord there for me, but I think, especially when we're younger, we forget that we do have the power to pursue what we want to do. Like, I was faced with similar issues with being told to do chemistry and biology, and whereas I liked chemistry and maths, but they were like, "Well, no, maths goes with physics." And I'm thinking, well, I don't want. I wanted to cherry pick what I wanted to do and what I was good at. And like you say, I'm here where I am today, and I have no regrets. But I think, especially the younger generation, you kind of guided down these paths and told what to do. And actually, we should feel empowered to say, no, that's not right for me. And I do have a choice. And obviously, with some sort of balance there, you can't be that bullheaded. But I kind of think that's important to think about, and probably something I might wish I'd have thought about sooner. But
Absolutely.
anyway, I love that though. And is it are you what's the actual term for a bird? Somebody who's a bird enthusiast.
Well, I mean, for me, is bird watcher, ornithologist. There's also the term twitcher, which people kind of, people now twitch. A twitch is, let's say there was a rare bird suddenly appeared in the southwest of England, and I got an alert through on the old mobile phone. Then I'd be off on a twitch. You get in
Oh,
the car, you go, and so a twitcher is somebody who effectively goes off and chases rare. I don't chase rare birds around the country. I don't even chase them around Greater Manchester, if I'm honest. I have my times that I go and do that. But so people conflate the terms sometimes, bird watcher and twitcher. They're actually two different things.
and
But I'm not bothered what people call me.
honestly, I've learned so much already today because I didn't know that was a term. And now if someone told me they were a twitcher, I'd understand it more. So thank you for that. Um, okay, then. So we've talked about how the industry's evolved since you started, and I guess kind of talking back to IT service management, SIAM specifically, how do you maybe see it evolving in the future, and where your role fits into that?
Right. Oh. Well, you can't talk about the evolution of service management and SIAM now without mentioning those two letters, A and I. AI is going to have a massive effect, and we could probably talk for hours about that. But for me, the key things in going forward, and these are, I think, words of caution. I would say that both SIAM and ITSM are very people centric as disciplines. They focus on customer experience, stakeholder engagement, and the C word, collaboration. And if organizations are going to over automate with chatbots and stuff without considering a sort of empathy and context and nuance and all the other things, then they're going to end up at some point and at some juncture alienating customers and eroding trust. And I think, if you think about SIAM in particular, it depends on relationship management across multiple providers. And I think replacing too much of that with AI is going to weaken collaboration until we fully understand it. And very closely linked to that is what I would suggest is a kind of loss of knowledge and context. Again, traditional ITSM and SIAM depend heavily on tacit knowledge, things that you can't write down. When that particular person rings the service desk, oh yeah, that's the guy that rings the service desk and asks. It's not his programming and his code development that's wrong. It's the operating system that they're working on. Just knowing that one story from many years ago, Steph, there was a service desk at a police force, and they had two ladies working in a particular outpost police station in clerical roles. And when they had an issue, they both used to ring the service desk up rather than just one of them because they thought they'd get it done quicker. Yeah, if they both rang up. So, it's just that sort of nuance and so on. And knowing that, I think, you've got to be careful with AI. And that sort of loss of knowledge, the tacit knowledge, the experience, the context, the judgment, that's really, really important. And you've got to make sure that you don't rely on AI that much that you end up making decisions in isolation where things like rationale and so on, why you made the decision is actually obscured, because why you make a decision is very often the biggest learning point. Choosing not to do something, the reasons you chose not to do something are just as important as the reasons sometimes that you choose a path going forward. So AI is going to make a massive difference. But I think with that, definitely with that, I think with that word of caution, which brings me round to the second thing that you'd asked me, Steph. And you'd asked me about how I saw my future in this. Now, if there are any Star Wars geeks amongst us, and I'll count myself as one, The Force Awakens, there's a bar owner called Maz, and she looks at the guy who used to be the. If you're not a Star Wars fan, this is going to mean zip to you, but if you are, it will. Yeah, live with it.
Sorry.
And there's a guy called Finn who used to be a stormtrooper and becomes a hero with the Resistance. And she turns around and she says to him, "I've lived long enough to see the same eyes in different people." And I think that's a great line. And to an extent, I think that's my story. So it's less now about me being, I think, the one with all the answers. I've still got some of them, hopefully. And but more about me being guide. I've walked the walk. I've been there before. The parchment, the DVD, the Blu-ray. I've been through everything. So you can look at a proposal or a new way of working and say, you know what? Yeah, it's a goer. It's got a chance. Or you can say, you know what? I think we're going to have an issue here. I've seen this before. So my role, I think now, and it works with the sort of director consulting expert role at CGI here, is, that I add a layer of reassurance and realism that comes from experience. So hopefully that's going to make a difference. So yeah, as I at the other end of my career and my path through service management, it's more about I need to practice and have a beard and being that sage perhaps, rather more than being the one that goes out there and comes up with the ideas. Not to say that I still don't have one or two, but it's more about helping people now to helping people with different perspectives to draw their ideas out.
Yeah, because I think that's really important and kind of comes back to the AI side of stuff in that balancing the use of these tools with still retaining knowledge, learning, and experience. Because sometimes you want to come to an answer quicker, and like you say, without getting to that point of an answer, you're not really learning. It's
Well,
sorry.
it's really, really interesting that I think I, tongue in cheek, say to most organizations, I was out doing some work at uh, an RAF organization a few weeks ago. And I always tongue in cheek say to people, do you know what? You're absolutely average. It is hugely, hugely rare now that I go out and see something that I've not seen before. But that doesn't mean that I've immediately got the answers, because what is new every time is the combination of things that you see. So, I will always see organizations with immature processes in service management, or I'll always see organizations with poor SIAM governance, but it always affects them in a slightly different way. So the pattern that that creates means the pattern that your solution has got to create has got to be unique and individual for every organization. And I always caution organizations that want cookie cutter. Yeah. I caution them with the value that they're going to get. I will always do them cookie cutter and something that's absolutely, you know, this is the way it's supposed to be. We've not tweaked it. We've not done anything to it, but recognize the limitations that you're going to get because you're choosing this approach. If you're choosing this approach and then telling me we're going to develop it, we're going to add value further down the line, all the way, I'll support them in that. But if you're choosing it and saying, because that's the best way to get things done, I would always, time out, caution. So,
Mm,
from that perspective, I don't see much new now, but I see lots different all the time.
interesting. I love how you've put that. And kind of tying that together then really, obviously you talked about all the different things that you have got going on, the experience that you've gained in the way that you've kind of curated your career in the later stages, the variety and stuff. What keeps you motivated and moving into the later stages? What certain elements or is that the answer?
Could say the mortgage, but
For us all, yeah. Yeah.
well, no. I think for me, what keeps me motivated is people coming back and saying that's made a difference. What keeps me motivated is organizations saying, yeah, actually, you know what? We've never really looked at it like that. That's different. That's put a different spin on it. That's the way we're going to think about it now. And so for me, SIAM wise, organizations who are doing it for the first time, and you just add a little bit. They've got quite often they've got the knowledge, but they think, well, have you thought about this? No, we've not. We don't think we need it. All right, then let's explore why you don't think you need that element of best practice. Oh, right. You're going to convince us that no. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let you explore why you think you don't need it. And then I'm going to say, cool. If that's why you think you don't need it, yeah, I'm good. You've actually now made the conscious decision not to do it rather than not doing it because you weren't aware of it. There's a massive difference between those two positions. And so, from that perspective, that's one of the things that keeps me going. The fact that I can still add value. When I get to a point where I think I'm no longer adding value, I'll quietly slip off and sit in a bird eye with a pair of binoculars. Yeah, there they are.
Interesting.
Yeah. One of the things about sitting in the office and looking out onto trees is you never know what's going to turn up. So you've always got your binoculars just to the side.
I really hope I get on a call with you one day, catch you in your binoculars. But
Believe me, if something comes out there now that I don't know what it is, you'll see it on this call.
love
The
that.
glasses will fly off, and that'll be it.
Feels great. And do you know what? I like speaking to you today, and people in this stage of their career. There's something really admirable and almost exciting about it. For we're not in the same bracket of stage in career, and I think
Don't wish your life away, Steph.
no, but I think we all wish to be younger, and I'm not wishing to be older either. But like, I think having that confidence and capability in the later stages is so exciting to look forward to. I'm on the journey.
Yeah, well, that's it. I can't say it's all been perfect. There's been one or two wrong decisions, one or two foisted upon me, but largely I believe that everywhere I've been, I've added value. And when I felt the organisations that I was with for a very short time were ones where I thought I wasn't adding value. I mentioned parity before; they don't exist anymore. So I'm happy with that. The other organisation do, so I won't mention. But there've been two organisations that I've been with a very, very short time, so 3 months, and I knew instinctively, wrong organisation for me. I'm not adding value, and
Yeah.
moved on. And as it happened, moved on both times to actually two very, very good choices for my career. Second one was Global Knowledge when I joined there, and the leader there was probably the best leader I've ever had, if I'm honest, Steph, in a guy called Alan Petman. Alan was a proper Yorkshireman, and he was into it. He played cricket at decent level, bit of football, Leeds United fan, Yorkshire Cricket Club. Likes what I says what I like. Proper Yorkshireman, and so I can say that because my granddad was born in Penistone, which even though I'm a Lancastrian, I've still got that black mark on my CV. But Alan was a brilliant leader. You knew what he wanted. He told you what good looked like, but then he let you get on with it, which was pretty much the way to manage me. And that's how, manage. And I've tried to manage and lead over my time rather than telling people exactly how to do something. Let them go and learn themselves. Let them get out there and learn themselves. Makes a huge difference.
I like that. And I really like the theme that you've kind of come through this conversation already, and how trusting your gut, knowing when something's not right and making those decisions, but also the value of people around it. And I think people choosing careers for the first time or moving on, you're kind of conflicted with what to prioritize. But I think as long as you've got a good balance amongst those things, is really valuable. But moving on then, for wisdom for Barry to pass on. Obviously, I've talked about, we've got a lot of people just starting out in the industry. And I guess a question to you is, what is maybe something that you would tell your younger self, or someone coming into the industry today?
The one thing, this is what I would tell me. This doesn't apply to everybody because some people are very happy at having a single specialism and going down that path. And everybody's different. But the one thing I'd have said to me is I've learned over, the last 30 years or so, the value of becoming that T-shaped individual where you've still got service management or SIAM as the main string to my bow. But I know stuff about other things. I know stuff about DevOps. I know stuff about Agile. I know stuff about Safe. I know stuff about Lean. I know stuff about collaboration. I know stuff about learning management. I know stuff about, and so on and so on and so on. Not in depth, unless sort of learning management, know a little bit more about that. But certainly, you know enough to be able to hold a conversation and put two and two together. When I was younger, I thought that probably success meant just mastering that one area and staying in that lane. You know, I was programming in Fortran, then I was programming in COBOL, and then I got into other stuff. But over time, working across multiple projects, multiple disciplines that I've done at CGI and elsewhere, although that depth and that core skill is essential, it's the breadth that's actually got me further. Yeah. So the depth hasn't necessarily, you reach a peak very, very quickly with depth. You know, how good a COBOL programmer you can be, you need to kind of spread out, I think, to really advance. That's what I tell me. And, you know, build that depth. Don't stop stretching across though, because, you know, the connections that I've made by stretching across have probably been some of the richest connections that I've made, and they've made the most impact as well. So try and turn yourself into that T-shaped individual would be, would be my advice to myself.
Yeah, I like that. And it sounds like you have done that, but what do you wish somebody maybe would have told you earlier and that could have shaped your career differently or past?
I'm not sure that there's any one thing that somebody could have told me, told me earlier. Actually, I will say one thing. And a good friend of mine since I trained him many, 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 many years ago. And working at the OU now, Sandra Whittleston. And Sandra, coming from a higher education background, she made the jump from being a support worker in a higher education background. She now lectures in IT service management. And again, she's at the same end of her career, as she don't mind me saying, sorry, Sandra, as me. But she said, you know, she's always said to me, every day is a learning day. Every day, never close your mind to learning something new. And that's actually probably quite a powerful thing, you know, that never ever, just because you would do it a certain way doesn't mean that it's not going to work in another way. And I think accepting that my way and the way I would do things isn't always right is something that I've learned over my career and probably wish I could have accepted a little bit sooner. Yeah, that accepting that there are other ways of doing things, that your way isn't always the right way. Maybe accepting that a little bit sooner would have been perfect. But thinking about where I am now, I'm not going to stress over it because it's nothing. I can't go back in time and change that. You know, I haven't got DeLoreans outside, Back to the Future or anything like that. So yeah, I'm kind of happy with where it's gone.
Yeah, good. Well, that's important. And I think I love that. And I think that's something that we've heard from people at all stages in their career, but that they get from the community or they get from mentoring or being mentored and stuff like that. And I guess I know obviously we've talked about you being a community champion and you very much give back to the SIAM community and the other communities that you're part of. But what sort of role do you feel that's played, and do you wish you'd had things sooner? And yeah, I guess just sort of advice to people who maybe aren't part of things like that.
Well, the whole mentoring thing and community is something, you know, I've been ITSMF now since 2002, so that's 23 years. Being involved in scopism and stuff, you know, as long as it's existed, really, way back to getting involved in the initial BOC in what was it, 2017. So community's always played a large part in my career and certainly helped it forward. I'm also part of the mentoring program at CGI, and they really, really do actively encourage it. And the guy I'm mentoring at the moment, Mo Segir, he's an absolute star. And I almost get as much from our sessions as he does. And I think the stars were aligned when CGI put us together. We'd both worked on the same account when I was contracting at Sellafield. He was at Capgemini at the time. And the people who were his mentors at the time were probably three people who I had a tremendous amount of time for, who were working on that particular account. David Snyden, Danny Delicate, and Teresa Perry Denton were kind of they were his mentors and managers, and they were three people that I looked at and thought, yeah, these guys know the stuff and they're good, and the way they work. We've also both got a shared passion for cricket. Though, in fairness to Mo, he played at a much, much higher level than I ever got to. He was bowling at minor counties level, I was bowling at minor geriatrics level in Manchester. But the relative ills of international cricket and fast bowling are sort of regular topics of conversation for us. So I'm really, really, really into that, the whole mentoring thing. I would get involved as a mentor or a mentee in either that. For leaders, I think community, if you're aspiring to lead in ITSM or SIAM, the value of community cannot be understated. ITSM, scopism, have introduced me to so many interesting and, I'll say it, useful people. So you don't have all the answers yourself, and it's only by engaging with peers, by sharing experiences, by learning from sort of others' successes and their failures as well, that you learn to grow yourself, and you grow faster and you produce better solutions by doing that than you could ever do on your own. I mean, one example at the moment, so I'm working with our Dutch CGI guys and sharing SIAM stories with my sort of Dutch DCE, director consulting expert counterpart, Willem Jan Prins, is, that's great. And it's a real thrill for both of us. We'll get on and we'll start talking about SIAM and off onto a tangent and then back and I still enjoy that. It's, and you think, well, hang on, you've been doing this for 35 years now. How can you still enjoy it so much? But I do.
Good. And I think that hits the nail on the head. It's what we want to offer people from the community side of things. And again, you get out what you put in, and you do put an awful lot in, and we are very, very appreciative of it, as are our members.
And you know what? The fact that you say you're appreciative of it, I can tell from you, Steph, or anybody that says we really, really appreciate that, whether they mean it or not. It's one of the things you learn over the years, isn't it? And and obviously, we've already said nice things about the work that you do for the community, and building that community. There must be at least a dozen of those 5,000 that are solely no. There's lots of it that's down to you. I'm only pulling your leg a little bit there. But you can tell when people genuinely mean it. And for me, when people say, yes, we've appreciated that, yes, that's added value, that's what keeps you getting up in the morning. That's what keeps you doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Barry, I have loved talking to you today. I mean, I do every time we speak, but I think that this has been really valuable for those who listen and watch, and hopefully they'll take a lot from it. Any parting words, anything else you want to say? Because that was a bit of a mic drop at the end.
Well, no, that's okay. I did say before that I've actually forgotten to do the one thing I said. Anybody that watches Premier League football, when the managers have the press conferences, will notice that they have the little Lucozade bottle carefully positioned next to them. So here we go. There's the CGI mug.
I don't know a scope is a mug, don't I?
Well, there we go. You'll have to get onto Claire's marketing budget. Scopeism mugs, scopeism pin badges. Away we go.
I will. I'll have my sticker at the conference. You can have one too.
Thank you.
But yeah, honestly, it's been brilliant. And thank you. If anyone's got any questions for Barry, absolutely reach out to him in the community on LinkedIn, and tell us what you loved about this episode and what you want to hear more of. But thank you for watching and listening. And we hope to see you again next time. Thank you, Barry.
Thank you very much. Cheers.